Hello everyone, and ciao from Italy. Now, if you know this channel, you can probably tell that this is not one of my normal videos. I'm kind of on the fly with some notes here, but wanted to put together a video responding to some of the comments that were left on my last video, which was called Modernity Has Cheated You. If you haven't seen that video, you can do so here or here. I don't really know where it is on YouTube, but I'll link to it. But basically, what I wanted to do is answer some of the critiques and concerns that were brought up. Now this video generated a lot of replies. Many of those were very, very, very positive, overwhelmingly so, of people who, really felt like they connected with what I had to say. They said, thank you for saying this. Gosh, keep persevering. I'm so glad that, someone has actually gone out and said this thing. And so those were all very encouraging, of course. But there are also many comments that were critiques of what I had to say. Some more charitable, some far less so. And I won't get into all of that. But basically, what I'm going to do in this video is kind of reply not to specific comments, but to the general themes and critiques that came up, because I think it's important. And the reason I'm doing this is not to get the better hand of people. Again, this is very impromptu. I just kind of threw this together for this weekend. But I want to do it for the people who do in some way resonate with what I have to say and want to see that there is actually a robust, a more robust at least, thought pattern kind of behind the ideas presented in that video. It's a 5-minute YouTube video. It's not an academic thesis. That concept seemed to be lost on some people. But anyways, I'll be outlining that in here. And the last kind of critique or preface before we get into everything is that it's not typically my tendency to reply to YouTube comments. I have a policy actually rather against it. If people say positive things, they say, oh, really enjoy this, then I say thank you, because I truly am grateful for those, and it's really easy and quick to say. But most comments I don't reply to, and my reasoning with that is because, quite simply, if you know this channel, I like beauty, I like a high quality of life, and that's something I strive to pursue. And what does not fall under a high quality of life is spending hours on end replying to YouTube comments of people I've never met and trying to come up with some bulletproof, answer to own whoever didn't like my video. That's not at all what I'm interested in. So really what I'm trying to do with this is simply bring to light some of the ideas that I presented in my video, expound upon them in light of the critiques levied against it, and ultimately also show why the one comment I did reply to, why I felt that it was very, very much worth replying to, because I do feel like it actually has to do with something that's at the heart of what this channel is trying to do. So without any further ado, we will get into this video. There are 3 main sections that I've broken it down into. That is the quality of art in the present, the ethos of art in the present, and finally, elitism, as based on this video's title. So, thanks for watching, and let's dive in. Alright, so the first main theme of critique that I saw in the comments of the last video had to do with there being quality art in the present, which people basically said, well, you can't just write off all of modern art, some of it's good. Which to that I say, duh. I mean, there are nearly 8 billion people on this planet. A lot of them do art. Statistically, there's bound to be good art. So I have no disagreement with that. I thought it was kind of funny that people brought that up. But what I will say is that I do think there's a degree to which we perceive more good art than there actually is. And the reason I'll say that is because I think it has to do with the general degradation of our tastes. And so what I mean by that overall is that being able to appreciate something that is high caliber art is not something that comes naturally. I've experienced this by myself without a doubt. With classical music, it's a great example. My appreciation of it 2 years ago, when I was wanting to get into it and whatnot and learning more about it, I thought I appreciated it. But my tastes have evolved. I've learned how to appreciate it better in a way that I was simply incapable of 2 years ago. I'd draw the comparison with a top shelf scotch, for example, or whiskey. If you give someone, upon their first tasting of scotch, if you give them a top shelf scotch, they will not like it. It's going to be probably repugnant. They're not going to get it. They're not going to be able to taste any of the subtleties of the flavor profile. And in many ways, they have to work up to that. They start with something that's lesser quality, it's not as great, but they work their way up, and as they do so, they learn how to taste. They learn how to experience it better. And so the same thing goes with great art. However, since there has been a general degradation of our taste, and I really mean this, we perceive there being far better art than there is. Because it's almost as if the art that's out there, which is, I'm thinking, I'm just going to use the example of films, television, some pop music as well, and even just a lot of contemporary music, forget pop. It's made with the consumer in mind. It's made with like, oh, how can we make this next episode better? How can we make, this one hot take come through in a movie or whatever? It's very, very transient. And what it means is essentially it doesn't have the time to develop and actually create the depth that it deserves. To give the complete polar opposite of this, by the way, I'd point you to Wagner's Ring Cycle, which is close to 15 hours of music with some of the most complex interweavings of leitmotifs, like these themes that accompany different characters. And this music, he called it a Gesamtkunstwerk, like a complete work of art. And it truly, truly, truly is. And upon first listening, you won't get probably 80% of what's actually there. I certainly don't. I'm getting into Wagner kind of as we speak, and there's so much that I know I don't get from him. But the part that I do in kind of opera or classical music in general is because I've been developing my taste. So I've been having different scotches, and I'm able to now appreciate far more than I was able to before. But because I realize that in myself, I also realize it in our society as a whole, feeling that the film and television and general entertainment that we're brought up to is akin to McDonald's. It's like we grew up feasting on McDonald's every day, this short mass-produced stuff, and at the end of the day, if someone were to bring us to a nice steakhouse and sit us down and have us try to eat that meal, we might not even want to. We might not want it because our taste buds have not been primed to that. They haven't been developed for that. And so, to bring all this full circle, when people are talking about the quality of art that exists today, I say, yeah, there's great art. However, I would say that truly great art in the modern era is the exception that proves the norm. Most of it is not great. It's far from that. And I would also try to challenge someone to go through somewhat of a similar experience to what I'm trying to go through, which is that of cultivating my taste, to be able to appreciate the complexity, again, to use this analogy, the complexity of the flavor profile of a really, really top-notch, high-level scotch that only someone who can, who's familiar with it, who's been doing it for a while, can truly appreciate to its fullest. Because if you or I can appreciate a phenomenal work to its fullest, we'll see just how banal all the rest is that's currently around us. So the second main critique, if you will, that I found while kind of browsing through the comments in this section was, in this video, had to do with the ethos of art in the present compared to the supposed ethos or the actual ethos of art in the past as I was referring to it. Now by ethos I mean simply the spirit of the work itself is kind of manifested in its attitudes and aspirations. Now what a lot of people are saying is that, well, yes, art is ugly now, but that's because life is ugly, and art reflects life and vice versa. And, me being a big Shakespeare fan, I know, of course, that it was Hamlet who said that the purpose of players is to hold, as 'twere, the mirror up to nature. And so that sounds very convincing at first, holding the mirror up to nature. That's what art is doing. Well, we live in a tough world, so it makes sense that our art is tough. However, what we have to pinpoint is something very key, which is that Hamlet says, purpose of the players, or the purpose of art, is to hold the mirror up to nature. It is not to be the mirror itself. It is not to be the mirror itself. And that point is key, because it is, of course, true that our life is full of suffering. However, it's also true that suffering itself is not art. And a representation of that suffering is not in and of itself art. A child starving in Africa is not art. It's horrendous. And we need to be really careful about where we kind of position ourselves in the present precedent that we set when referring to art in this way. I'm just glancing at the notes again. This is pretty on the fly. Another thing that I'd say is that a lot of the most beautiful art, in fact, comes from some of the most brutal periods. I mean, art's trash now, but we live in one of the most honestly cozy times in all of human existence. If you look at what life was like, forget 100 years ago, but go back 200, even 400, when some of the most incredible pieces of art the world has ever known were coming out, life was brutal. When people went to fight, they got slaughtered. There's not pain medicine. They got slaughtered viciously, brutally. Even something as simple as giving birth. Well, you have people literally dying in the process of giving birth. You have the kids dying. You have all the pain that's involved with it. Life was brutal and full of suffering to a degree to which we cannot imagine today. However, their art was full of beauty. And I love this point because I think it brings me back to one of the main points that I was trying to at least introduce people to in that last video, which is that there is, in fact, is a purpose to art, and that people in past generations actually recognize that. Whether consciously or not, they recognize that there is a purpose to art. And what is that purpose? In order to illustrate it, I'll give an analogy of sorts, which is that of going to a fancy restaurant. Now, when you or I go to a fancy restaurant, what we do is, we like the experience. I mean, we go for lots of reasons. Maybe it's to celebrate with family, maybe it's to celebrate a great occasion, maybe it's to go on a date. But regardless of why, we want something that is out of the ordinary, that's extraordinary in the sense of, again, out of our normal, ordinary, everyday lives. And so what do? We dress up. We want something that's quality, that is fancy, a candlelit dinner. We want an exquisite experience. We want some of the most tasty food. We want to feel kind of fancy. I mean, there's so many things that go into it. But the point is, a fancy restaurant, a high-class, exquisite, beautiful restaurant is not everyday life. But that's the exact reason why we go, for the simple fact that it is not everyday life. And to draw this analogy back to art, I would say that, for example, if I went to a fancy restaurant and I were served something that I would make at home, if I was sat down in a crappy chair that's kind of uncomfortable, I have, lukewarm food, the chicken's pretty overcooked, not the best, I'm not the best chef, okay? If they served me that, I would feel cheated because I went there for the explicit purpose of getting out of my day-to-day reality. I can cook at home, I can eat at home, I have to put up with that stuff at home, but let me go to a restaurant, let me have something that's great, that lets me get out of that. It's not, some people might say, oh, that's escapism. It is and it isn't. It's a healthy form. It's something that we always do. We always want things that are a little bit outside, that we know, okay, it's not going to last. I'm not going to eat every meal at a restaurant, so we're not escapist falling into it trying to deceive ourselves in that way. But we want something that's different, and it's a beautiful experience. We love eating out. We love having nice, fancy food at a restaurant. It's great, and great art does that. And that's what leads me to my final point, which is elitism. So, to wrap this video up, where I promised to start in the title and the intro, is this channel elitist? Am I elitist? Well, in one sense, yes, absolutely. I am elitist in the sense that I'm elitist when I say that a fancy restaurant is elite, that there is an elite tier of food, that there are elite chefs, that there are elite dining experiences that are better than the everyday experience, without a doubt. However, this is not at all elitist in the sense that I am rather advocating for the expansion of this to everyone. It's not elitist in the sense of it's exclusionary and it's only for the, select, enlightened few. It's not that at all. What I am advocating for is I'm saying more people deserve better. Everyone deserves better. They deserve more fancy dinners. They deserve more great art. In that sense, if you want to put any sort of political moniker on it, it's populist. It's not elitist, it's populist. Because I am saying that we, in the world we live in, we lack the resources. People lack the resources to appreciate and get to know great art in a way that it will truly change their lives, as it has mine. As it genuinely has mine. But I know because I lack those resources too. I had to come across it by myself. The education system didn't do it for me. Certainly kind of, our pop culture does not do that at all. And so this idea of propagating beauty, of spreading it, it's because we need a reprieve from suffering. It's because more people need to eat out more. They need fancy food. They need nice art that elevates the soul and does not simply reflect it. Yes, it can hold the mirror up to nature, but it should not be the mirror itself. And that's why I care so deeply about what I'm doing on this channel. Now, if you'll allow me, I do want to just touch on one thing about the definition of beauty. So a couple people pointed out, they said that, they thought that I was using beauty as to say that suffering can't exist in art, that it's all got to be, butterflies and ponies and flowers and all that stuff. And they said, well, have you ever read Shakespeare? Talking about tragedies and his comedies. And to that question, yes, I'm a huge Shakespeare fan, and I've studied a huge percentage of his catalog in depth. So, I'm not a newcomer to him. What I would say is that, of course, suffering can exist in art. Of course, comedic elements can exist in art. Of course, these dirtier kind of undersides of life can exist in art if wrought beautifully. And by wrought, I mean that in the sense of crafted, molded, created, if they are done so beautifully, which Shakespeare does. Because, talk about tragedy for a second. We've been talking about the suffering that's inherent in life. And in tragedy, I love Shakespeare's tragedy. They're my favorite plays of his. But the reason I love them is because they are so beautifully crafted. King Lear is heartbreakingly beautiful. It's heartbreaking. It's tragic. But it is so in a way that actually helps us live better and avoid future suffering. I forget who said this, but one person who actually looked into the nature of tragedy, why we like tragedy. Almost, so many operas and plays and whatnot are tragic, and why do we like that? What this person put forward is that essentially, in suffering all, we, the audience, suffer none. And we get to emerge from that experience with a new grasp on how to handle ourselves, on how to, avoid footfalls of these characters, of the King Lears, of the Macbeths, of the Romeos and Juliets. And so in order to actually avoid suffering in the future, it all comes back to that. So even if it's tragic, it can still be tragic in a way that's beautifully crafted, that really helps us, live more rich experience and more rich lives because of that. Now that's tragedy. I'll touch on comedy briefly, where I'll say too, we have a lot of silly comedies today. There are also some really, really deep and beautiful comedies. Much Ado About Nothing by Shakespeare. I just saw the production at Shakespeare's Globe in London, which was beautifully charming, and they did, one of the best productions I've ever seen of any play, hands down. This is one of my favorite plays by Shakespeare. It's a comedy, but it's so humane. It's so just beautiful in so many ways. And to take an opera, The Marriage of Figaro by Mozart, it's an opera buffa, like a really, comedic opera that relies on a lot of the old tropes of kind of silly, operas before they got kind of more fleshed out and complex and whatnot. But Mozart brings so much humanity to the people in the plays. They're not simple archetypes. They're real, living, breathing, human characters, and we get to go through the whole experience of what they're going through, which yes has a lot of comedic elements, but it does so in a way that makes us more in tune with our humanity. So that's what I'm trying to get at. That is what I feel that we are lacking in today's day and age, and what I want to help other people who want to access that more. I want to help provide the tools for you to do so. That's what I truly care about, because again, I know how much it's impacted my life. To wrap this up, I'd say, to recap, tragedy can be beautiful, comedy can be beautiful, again, if beautifully wrought, and eucatastrophe can be beautiful. This is a term that was framed by Tolkien. I really love this. This is basically a sudden positive change in events that is brought on often by grace rather than a hero's undertaking, by his own effort. It's essentially saying, that I included that, I'll say, just to say that there are positive endings that, of course, are inspiring. Typically when we think of beauty, we think of this eucatastrophic plots or the imagery that we see, that's inspiring in a painting, that we feel in a song. There's that. There's also tragedy in the comedy. They all go together, but whenever they're beautifully wrought, they bring about beautiful things in our lives. To wrap all this up, I'll touch on something that T.S. Eliot said in one of his poems. It's a sentiment which is essentially to redeem the time, redeem the dream. To redeem the time, redeem the dream. We need something that we aspire to. Bodhi talked about this in his last episode on the sins of modern kind of life and whatnot. 7 deadly sins of modernity, he called it. His last video, he talks about us killing ideals because we feel like we can't actually reach them. I mean, Aesop's fables touch on this at times. Where someone strives for something and they say, well, we can't obtain it, and so they just say, it wasn't that good in the first place. That is a lot of what our culture is doing, and I'm saying that in order to redeem the time, we need to redeem the dream. We need to redeem that higher ideal to which we strive, and great and beautiful art does this. Now, lastly, I'm trying to see. Yeah. Art can be many things, but at its best, it is something that causes us to move and think deeply. And great art does this, whether it's comedic, whether it's tragic, whether it's eucatastrophic. Great art does that. In order to redeem the time, we need to redeem the dream. And that's what I'm hoping to offer a little bit with this channel. So, hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you next week with a real video, kind of the more, standard gist for this channel. And in the meantime, I hope this gives some good food for thought, and have a wonderful and beautiful weekend. Ciao.